Very strong reform Democrat that the Democratic Party wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, and the National Party did not lift a finger for him. And so he wound up losing by about 7 points in a district that had been massively Republican. So again, just showing you where their values are. They could have won that race, but they did not want to put a progressive Democrat in power. So, same old, and that message is not being lost on many people, although there is the usual propaganda campaign going on out there, and it's really important to tune it out and to not be intimidated and not be silenced by it. How did we get to this right-wing extremism of Donald Trump? It's very clear historically where right-wing extremism comes from. It's no secret that you see this kind of thing when everyday people are thrown under the bus over and over again. When our wages are basically stagnant while the cost of living has skyrocketed. So the value of our wages is average wages are barely above the poverty level right now. The jobs that have come back are the part-time, low-wage, insecure, temporary jobs that aren't enough to keep a family out of poverty. An entire generation of young people is locked into predatory student loan debt. The numbers keep going up. It was 44 million last I looked, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that now. We see black lives continuing to be squandered, living in the target hairs. We see millions of migrants who are now threatened with deportation, people who are essentially refugees from predatory policies like NAFTA, which displaced millions of farmers and factory workers as well, who've come into this country and then get criminalized for basically fleeing in order to support their families and to, keep the wolves of starvation, at the door, or the violence related to our drug policy, our war on drugs, where over 100,000 people have been killed in Mexico alone, and then not to mention our wars and our regime change, which, has displaced, now according to the United Nations, it's 65 million refugees this year, largely from war, but also from poverty. And, this is not unrelated to our very policies. People come here, they then get criminalized and sent back to the chaos and the violence that they're fleeing from in the first place. Which is why we say for people, who have a problem with the refugee crisis, the most important thing we can do is to stop causing it in the first place. In this crisis, this set of converging crises, really, that we've created, another piece of that is this outrageous economic disparity. Last year, we heard that 8 billionaires now have the wealth of half of humanity all combined. 8 billionaires. The year before, anybody remember what it was? Was it 16? And then the year before that, I think it was 64. And then before that, I think it was 84. So you can see where things are going. Things are not moving in the right direction, they're moving in the wrong direction. And same goes for climate. And I think, we don't need to be reminded about that, but I just want to underscore that we have a climate emergency. And we need to declare that emergency. Like when Pearl Harbor was bombed in the Second World War, we declared an emergency. And you know how long it took us to transform our economy? 6 months. It took 6 months to move from a 0% of GDP on a wartime footing to, it was 25%. A huge sector of the economy was converted almost overnight. And when you look at the threat of Pearl Harbor compared to what we're looking at now, essentially losing all harbors, all population centers, not 65 million global refugees, but 600 million global refugees, which is just not, it's morally unacceptable and outrageous, but it's also something that civilization is not going to withstand. So we need to take action. We need to declare that emergency. And the good news, this is very dire. If you accept the propaganda that we are powerless and can do nothing about the predators who are running the show. All of this news is very dire. But on the other hand, it's not dire at all if you reject the fundamental premise that we are powerless. And as Alice Walker says, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. It's really important to remember we do have the power. In fact, the number of people locked into student debt alone, which is, 64 million, I think? I have to check my numbers again. No, I'm sorry, 44 million. It's 44 million locked into student loan debt. That was enough that could have won a three-way presidential race, which tells you something else, if we'd been able to get the word out, which is why they had to prevent us from getting the word out, because we are a threat. And I have to say, it's a great tribute to our power and to what we accomplished that they are continuing to smear us and to fear campaign against our campaign, even after the race is over. This is not a race, but both, Kellyanne Conway and Rachel Maddow, who I call Rachel Mad Dog, or maybe Mad Cow, like Boston Marbles. They continue to come after us, which, says something really good. That we are making them very uneasy, that they feel like they have to conduct this smear campaign. It's really a great honor, I think, to all of us that they continue to wage this campaign.
We must be doing something right.
I think we are. We definitely are. And one of those things that we're doing right is really debunking this mythology that we are powerless. We are not powerless. We are powerful. And we actually have the numbers that it takes the minute we work together, the minute we join forces. And that's what a political party is. It took me 50 years of my life to understand that. I had nothing to do with political parties for the first 50 years of my life because all I knew about were Democrats and Republicans. And I didn't want to have anything to do with that kind of manipulation that most people associate with politics, because that is what those parties are about. Manipulating voters, intimidating them, really exercising extortion, relying on this lesser evil thing so that people go to the polls. And what's the main question that's supposed to be in your mind? Who do I hate the most? What is that for a democracy? A democracy needs a moral compass. It needs moving forward. It needs what we're for. We need to vote for what we're for, not against what we fear. But this is the stranglehold they hold us in, because they are very afraid of where we have the power to go. That number, 44 million, young people locked in debt. It's both a win in a three-way presidential race, but it's also a win for any other race where there are young people that haven't moved out and left the region, which happens some places, but certainly in our urban areas, they are full of young people. And I think it's really important to remember that even when you're running for local office, you can run on a campaign, on an agenda that includes making higher education free, public higher education free, and arguing for student debt. Now, student debt can't be bailed out at the local or state level, but we can continue to advocate for it. However, as a local elected, you can go to your legislature, and to the governor and everybody else, and be a voice for bringing down the cost of higher education, and in fact, making it free, which is what it should be. And in fact, the state of New York, Governor Cuomo, just felt the heat enough to have declared public higher education free in New York State if you are below some $120,000 combined, approximately, income, which is a start, but needs more. They can do better, we can do better, but it is a start. If you provide benefits only to poor people, they won't be around for long. And it also entails a lot of tracking, which is very costly in and of itself, and pretty soon you cancel out the savings of eliminating the other people. We know that public higher education pays for itself. We know that from the GI Bill, where every dollar we spent, Congress was keeping track, we got back $7 in return. So, what's not to love about making higher education free? And it pays for itself in, because when you got a better workforce, you have a better economy, you're getting more revenues and more public benefits across the board. So this is a no-brainer, and we should be doing that. And we have enormous power for standing up and calling for it. And so we can force people like Andrew Cuomo to try to stay ahead of the curve. But, they're never going to go more than halfway, and they're hardly even going to go halfway. So we also forced Cuomo, thanks to Howie Hawkins, our governor candidate, the Green governor candidate in New York, thanks to the pressure that Howie exerted, and let's give a round of applause. Howie applied the heat about fracking and forced Cuomo to actually take a stand and to ban fracking, which has been if I'm not mistaken, I think Maryland has also just recently done so too. So that's really exciting. And we have a strong green presence in Maryland as well, with lots of great up-and-coming candidates too. And in terms of this climate crisis, where we are going is not just banning fracking. We're calling for a solution that will address not only the crisis of the climate, but also the crisis of the economy. Because most people are feeling that first and foremost. Even though people realize the climate may be deadly 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, in our lifetimes, not having a job and getting thrown out of your home, being homeless, is also deadly. In fact, homelessness and poverty has a mortality associated with it of, get this, 500,000 people a year die from causes attributable to poverty and inadequate education. So, this is not, this is not just a theoretical threat. People are really looking at that threat every day right now, with the cost of housing skyrocketing and jobs being as lousy and insecure as they are. So, we're calling for a joint solution, a Green New Deal, like the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression, but it's also a Green New Deal, so it will solve the climate problem at the same time. And in particular, we say, we need all hands on deck. This is an emergency. We need 100% clean renewable energy by 2030, not by 2050. That's what the science tells us. You know, we had a big march for science yesterday. I was at the cannabis rally myself, so I didn't get to be there, but I know of a lot of people who were. And I'll tell you, part of the reason I wasn't at the climate rally was because they don't let Greens speak at the climate rallies.
You mean the science?
That's right. Well, it was. You're right. It was a science rally, but it was also Earth Day.
Oh.
Yeah, and we have been shut out of Earth Days for a long time. And, you know, unfortunately, the Democrats have the infrastructure to be organizing these really big events, and so they don't want Greens to speak there. And, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the Democrats...
first, they would have let you.
Okay, all right, great. Well, let me know. That's right, and it's the events that we're participating in at the level of our communities that are not overwhelmed by the big Democratic infrastructure. Because the Greens are front and center in this fight. And, you know, and we should be heard. Because this fight is also a political fight. It's not just a fight about educating our leaders. Because they've been educated, you know, in the words of... it was Upton Sinclair, you can't teach a man something when his income depends on not knowing it. You know, our elected leaders get paid not to understand climate change. You know, that's who they're paid by, the fossil fuel industry and the war industry. And so their job is to stay the course. So it's really important, you know, that we be seen and heard. But, you know, in terms of the solution that we need, it is to create this an emergency jobs program that solves both the jobs emergency and the climate emergency. And at the same time, it makes the wars for oil obsolete, and, as if that wasn't good enough, it pays for itself just in the health benefits of eliminating fossil fuels. So it's tens of thousands of people who die every year. In the U.S. alone, it's something like 6 or 7 million worldwide that die from the impacts of fossil fuels. And, you know, there's just so much benefit from cleaning that up, it pays for itself. So we shouldn't have to, you know, go down on bended knees and beg for a program that's going to pay for itself, whether it's higher education for free, or whether it's greening our energy supply and our food supply and our public transportation. This is a no-brainer. This is stuff that should be done, and it should be done right now. Let me say a quick word about mass incarceration and the epidemic of police violence, which is very much related to the drug war. You know, the size of our prison system, some say it's multiplied by a factor of 10, some say it's a factor of 5, but whatever it is, it's huge how much our prison system has expanded in just the last couple of decades. And that's specifically because of the war on drugs, which is exercised largely against communities of color. And, you know, if you look at proportionally, there are far more people of color. It's at least twice the rate of people who are charged, convicted, and then subject to very harsh sentencing if you are a person of color, not so much if you are not. So it is a racist system. It is the new Jim Crow from the get-go. And not only does it criminalize people for using a substance, in the case of marijuana, which is safer than alcohol and tobacco, but once you've done your time, then you come out and you can't get loans, you can't get in-state school, housing, voting, yeah, business loans. I mean, you name it. You're really locked out, and you pay a life sentence even after you've done your duty for something that shouldn't have been criminalized in the first place. So, you know, we are, as Greens, we've been ahead of the curve on this. This is not new to us. We're calling for national legalization of cannabis and for the treatment of substances, substance use, altogether as a public health problem, not a criminal problem. That's how it is. The other thing here is that we're also calling for looking at the real underlying causes of the drug epidemic. And, talk about incredible numbers. 500,000 people have died since the year 2000 from drug overdoses, and that's mostly now from heroin and from the synthetic opioids like fentanyl, which are both, it was a prescription, over-prescribing, massively over-prescribing for corporate profit, basically. And then now there's an illegal street fentanyl, which also gets mixed with the heroin, so people don't know how strong the stuff is that they're taking. So it's extremely dangerous. And now for the first time in this country, people are actually talking about safe drug use centers, which is something that's been done in Europe and Portugal and has enabled them to basically stop the mortality, the skyrocketing mortality of substance abuse. But it's really important to look at what's driving substance abuse. It's poverty, it's hopelessness, it's lack of access to education and jobs. There's been a huge increase among middle-aged whites without a college education. I don't know, you may have heard about this last year. It was just discovered by some epidemiologists who were looking at the data. And they were shocked because it's the size of the AIDS epidemic at its worst. And it's essentially an epidemic of depression, of suicide, and of drugs and alcohol and their consequences. In the very group that has been hit hardest, I shouldn't say hit hardest, but who's taken the deepest dive, the group that had security and now doesn't have it, and they have just taken a tumble. So it's that, it's the same thing that's driving right-wing extremism, is this incredible desperation, the loss of social cohesion, the loss of a sense of community. That's, this is sort of like the final common denominator of what happens in a society that's driven by corporate profit. This is kind of crony, disaster capitalism where it takes us. And that's why we're standing up as Greens and why we've been leading the charge as Greens for a long time for a new system that puts people, planet, and peace over profit across the board.
Yeah.
That's what we're not talking about marginal change, we're talking about systemic change. Let me make a quick comment also about the refugee crisis. It's been one of the real successes of the resistance since Trump was elected. What was the first thing people mobilized around? Well, it was actually the Women's March. And I think one of the consequences of the Women's March is the fact that Fox News just fired And, I think very much that's related to just a new kind of, resistance among women and in the public to predators like Donald Trump and the folks at Fox News. So it's exciting. That's part of what we've done. But the very next thing to happen, was the resistance against Trump's Muslim ban. And it is an incredible tribute to the success of the movement that we stopped the first Muslim ban, and then we stopped the second Muslim ban in the courts. So that's another one for a round of applause. Because the courts really do respond to the court of public opinion. And it was the same thing when Roe versus Wade was first passed. For those whose hair is my color, you may remember that there were a lot of people out in the street at the time. It was a very conservative Supreme Court, but we were really standing up strong for women's reproductive lives and our work lives and all the rest. And we forced a very conservative Supreme Court under a very conservative authoritarian president, kind of like Donald Trump, and that was Richard Nixon. Under the rule of Richard Nixon, we got women's right to choose. And, you know, we're standing up again now in a way that's very reminiscent of what was happening back then under Nixon, which I'll come back to a little bit later. You know, that fight for women's rights, and I should say the huge march that took place was then followed by the fight to stop the Muslim ban, which now continues in the fight to stop the deportations. And, you know, the deportations are ongoing, as they have been under the last administration as well, which is important to recognize. This administration talks a much uglier message, but this was a reality going back for the past 8 years. In fact, Donald Trump's goal of deporting 3 million immigrants is what was actually achieved under the Obama White House, deporting 3 million immigrants. So it's very important that we continue to stand up and continue to fight on this. Making, you know, declaring our cities sanctuary cities is important, and, you know, we just need to continue pushing the envelope on that. So we may need to go beyond sanctuary cities because ICE may come in even without cooperation. But ideally, we don't want our local governments or our colleges and universities turning over data and information about where people live and who is not documented and so on. So we don't want cooperation, but it's really important that we defend people who are essentially refugees from predatory war and economic policies, who've been forced to flee to come here for their lives, for them to be criminalized and sent back. It's just not acceptable. You know, it's so reminiscent of the words of the famous theologian under Hitler, who said, you know, first they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I said nothing. You know, then they came for the gays, and I said nothing because I was not gay. Then they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I was not a Jew, and so on. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So, you know, it's very important. We need to take this neo-fascist threat very serious, and to stand up and to stop it before it begins to commit this kind of human rights abuse. And one thing I'd like to just share with you, you know that International Workers' Day is coming up on May 1st. And this is also, for many people, this is a strike for a day without immigrants. It's recognizing immigrant workers in particular who are among the most vulnerable among workers, you know, subject to wage theft and low wages and very unsafe working conditions and all that. So one thing that we Greens are starting to do in my home state, but also this came up among the global Greens as we were sort of talking about how these crises are converging, not just in the US, but everywhere, you know, neo-fascism, climate, war, the predatory economy, austerity. And we're saying to ourselves, so what are we going to do about this? You know, more of the same isn't doing it. We're fighting for political change, but that's not a quick overnight. You know, under some conditions it may be, and you want to be ready for when there's a really transformative moment. You want to have political capacity, and it's very important that we keep the heat on. But what else can we do? And what we kept coming up with over and over is we need to bring back the capacity to conduct a general strike and to engage that strike not just on one issue, but to make it across all the issues of justice and peace, so that it's a general strike that crosses issue borders and it crosses national borders. So that we're all doing this together in the spirit of Alice Walker's comment that the biggest way we give up power is by not knowing it. We have that power. We are the 99%. We do have solutions. And we've got an absolute imperative for action right now. And it's for big action. We need action that is commensurate with the severity of the crisis that we face. So wouldn't it be cool if we were doing mass actions together that were synchronized?
Tax revolt. Tax revolt.
Well, yes, that too.
In the free world.
I'm all for tax revolt, but it's really nice to do stuff where we get out and we sit down or we sit in or we lock down or we boycott and we basically conduct the general strike, which has been a very powerful tool throughout history. It was a very powerful tool in 2006 when the immigrant rights movement really took a huge leap forward when millions of people struck for a day without immigrants. And what happened? Suddenly the Sensenbrenner bill was, it was curtains. It did not get passed. It got stopped because suddenly the Latino voters, who were not the undocumented, but who are related to the undocumented, suddenly they were flexing their muscle and they were visible. So I just want to throw out this idea. We're calling it a May Day meetup for movement unity. And we're encouraging the May Day groups to look deep at the causes of the refugee crisis. Because the refugee crisis for our migrant workers, what's driving people into this state of crisis? It is displacement from jobs, it's economic predation, it's war, it's climate change, it's gender violence, violence against women. All of these things, these deeper issues connect us. So what we're saying is not, let's have the be-all, end-all general strike. That's just, we don't have capacity to do that. But how about we start building capacity? So that on these days that we have these big events, let's also do meetups where we're building our connections and we're building a network. And we are beginning to develop the tools to be able to conduct coordinated mass actions. And that means things like developing strike funds. It means stuff like developing our databases. It means coordinating on message. It means doing outreach to working people and other constituencies. So there's specific work that we can do. And maybe, when May Day, the first May Day happened, in 1886, I think it was, with Haymarket, they prepared for that for 2 years. They didn't just make it happen, a couple months before. There was a big build-up for that, and there was a very organized labor movement at the time. So they had some advantages we don't have. However, we are organized, not so much in the workplace anymore, but we're organized in our communities. We're organized to fight for clean energy. We're organized to fight for health care as a human right. We're organized for immigrant rights. And as we begin to link our networks, that's when we really get to critical mass. And that's when we really start to move. So I'll just throw that out as a, I have our one flyer here, but I will send it to Mike and to Barbara to just pass around for those who are interested. It's May Day meetups for movement unity, building local alliances for global mass action. Sort of, let's think about developing some new tools to take us further. I'll just say one more word here about the wars, because this is so critical and so related to everything else that we're trying to do. Talk about tax resistance, almost half of your income tax dollars are going to this bloated, dangerous military budget that has massively expanded since 9/11. So how successful is this military budget? We've spent $6 trillion when you include the ongoing healthcare costs of our wounded veterans, who should be much better cared for than they are. $6 trillion and tens of thousands of wounded soldiers and killed soldiers, and over 1 million people killed in Iraq alone, mostly civilians. And what do we have to show for it? You know, we've spared no expense. We've left no missile unfired. And what do we have to show? Failed states, mass refugee migrations, and worse terrorist threats. They get better for a little while you're throwing all your ammo at them, but as soon as you move to the next battlefront, they're right back. The Taliban has more territory than ever. Al-Qaeda is broader than ever, and you know, ISIS is going strong, shall we say? You know, and the last you know, so-called terrorist murders that occurred, the police that were shot on the Champs-Élysées in France, you know, that was a guy who was violent, who was assaulting police, even before he adopted the excuse of ISIS. We have a problem of violence here, and ISIS is just one manifestation of it. And very often the people who adopt ISIS, you know, are people who've been violent for a long time. And many of them are domestic abusers as well. You know, so the common denominator here is violence. The common denominator here is a fragmented society. It's also a society which is very sick in many ways. We're eating a very sick food system. We are breathing sick air. Often our water is polluted. You know, we've looked at the crisis of lead in the U.S., but it is much bigger, of course, than those few communities where we have focused. And what's one of the things that lead does? It makes people very angry. It tends to make people more prone to violence. You know, and lead is just one of thousands of chemicals to which we are exposed that we know very little about, actually. So, you know, we're living in this petri dish right now, which is, you know, it's sort of tailor-made for pathology, psychopathology and physical pathology and social pathology. How do we fix this? We fix this by cleaning up our act, you know? We fix this by actually taking care of people rather than by funding bombs and useless wars. We need to put our resources into true security, which means taking care of people, ensuring that we have jobs, healthcare, education, housing. It's far less expensive than this destruction, which is bankrupting us in our future. Wrap up and then we'll open it up for discussion. I'll just wrap up saying that there is a solution to Syria and the Middle East and Afghanistan and all the rest. You know, it's called a weapons boycott. Instead of arming everybody and their enemy, we're arming both sides. You know, we need to create a weapons embargo to the region. And, you know, there have been many experts on national security who've advocated as much, and it makes a lot of sense. We need to just shut down the flow of weapons and ammunition. Basically, we are throwing gasoline on a fire, and it's a fire which we've created basically through the fossil fuel economy, the fossil fuel exploitation, the fossil fuel imperialism, which has been very destructive and destabilizing to the region and prevents the development of democracy and human rights and all that. So we're not talking about just throwing up our hands and walking away and continuing to funnel the weapons and the destruction for profit over to them. We're talking about a weapons boycott, and we're also talking about a freeze on the funding to those countries that continue to sponsor radical extremism. And that means places like Saudi Arabia. not funding Israel's army to the tune of $8 million a day in order to commit war crimes and violate human rights. So, we would apply this across the board also to Saudi Arabia, who is, again, one of the major predators in the region, to whom we have sold, what was it? It was over $100 billion worth of weapons in the last decade, last I looked. So we can shut this war machine down by standing up for, a peaceful, just, green future. And we can instead invest those dollars into greening our economy and encouraging China and Russia to do the same to green their economies, because guess what? When we move the dollars from the military into green energy, then we don't have a reason to be fighting in the first place. So we can make those wars obsolete by investing in the green economy and green energy and green food, which is going to save our skins anyhow, and which we must invest in order to survive, not just through the end of the century. It could be even the next couple decades at the rate that the climate crisis is accelerating. So it's pretty clear. Martin Luther King said it a couple decades ago. We have a choice between chaos or community. It's clear the chaos factor has been accelerating, but people are mobilized now like we've never been before, and people are not buying the propaganda of the Democratic Party that says, let's just go back to what created Donald Trump. People are in revolt, especially young people. For me to be at the cannabis rally, largely with the African American community in DC, who are the ones who are the victims of the war on drugs, and for them to be like calling us out over and over from the stage, even like after I had spoken and the music had begun, it's like people were saying, this is who we voted for, and this is why, we are voting green, and the Green Party is really where it's at. We're seeing it, not only in the hip-hop community, we're seeing it from many of the, from the refugee community and the immigrant rights community, who've really gotten the courage of their convictions now to say enough. The Democrats have done this. They may talk nice, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Their walk has been the same. So we're seeing people stand up with the courage of their convictions to say no to the lesser evil, to fight like hell for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. And I also have to give a shout out real quick, of course, for ranked choice voting, because it puts an end to this nonsense that you have to choose between two evils. You don't have to choose between two evils, and you shouldn't have to choose between two evils. You should be able to bring your values to the vote. If you can't do that, what is this democracy about? It cannot be guided by the question of who you hate the most. We have to be able to identify our future that we deserve and to fight for that future. So that's what we're doing together, and with the power of people like you and this party, I want to encourage you to support this party, to continue the great work that you are doing, to run for office or support others who are, but to give generously. It's really important for us to get the word out. Right now, people are clamoring for what we've got. We need an organized party in order to get the word out, to develop a powerful social media apparatus, as well as to use the traditional, mainstream press and independent media. And kudos to the independent media who are here today covering this event. We need to be firing on all cylinders right now, like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. So I really thank you for being here today, and thank you all so much for creating this magical moment that we are in right now. So hold on to your hat. The fun has just begun, and we are going to have
Doctor, how would you suggest we stop the,
Hang on just one second. Hang on just one second. I'm going to just give some numbers, and if you can remember your numbers. 1, 2.
Dr. Two?
2?
I'll be 3.
Okay. Linda, you're going to be 3. You'll be 4.
Okay, I'll be 4.
5,
Also-
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And if you can try to keep your, okay, 13. Remember your number if you can. And if you can keep your question to about a minute, we can be sure to get everybody in. And I'll try to keep my answers short so we can.
Okay, if you wouldn't have the same media cover, you wouldn't be the president. Because that is the question. How can we break this blockade, the media blockade? Because no matter what you say, no matter what you do, if nobody says, I have to be in this room, and we go home, nobody know it. How can we have a transition
Yes.
to social media or other way to outreach the masses?
Yes.
Because we cannot be inside it, because and nobody, CNN, Fox News won't cover us.
Right.
We need to do emergency and strategic communication.
Yes.
How can you help that?
Great. So, yes, lots of ideas. It's not one silver bullet, but it's many things together that we can do. You know, my sense right now is that it's the fear thing. That, so a lot of people know about us, but they won't vote for us because they're afraid about the spoiler things. So I do think that ranked choice voting is really critical and important. And it will help people vote for us. I think the other thing is really targeting the communities who are in revolt right now. So that is young people who are in debt. It is people who are fighting against deportations. It is definitely the cannabis community and the African American community, the Black Lives Matter community. So it's establishing connections to those networks and being there to support them. That's what I find has been really critical, is going to the frontline communities, being a part of the frontline communities, and bringing green support, bringing everybody there for the day without immigrants. You know, being there to show up and support, and that's how you begin developing these relationships. In addition, yeah, social media is huge. I want to encourage people to go to our campaign Facebook page, which we continue to use now. We're building what's called the Green News Network. So we do Facebook Live interviews several nights a week at 8 p.m. And we do, Q&A, and it's been very engaging. We get some really large audiences through that. So that's one of the tools we want to keep building. But I think every state party needs to have support to be able to develop a strong social media site. And it's hard to do that. You need resources to do it. I'm very hopeful. You know, we have a national meeting coming up in July in New Jersey. And for the first time, I think we're going to have a...
Where's the news? Where?
It's, in Newark. Great.
My father doesn't live in Newark.
It'd be great. So, we're going to be voting for the first time. There's going to be a really contested election for our steering committee. Normally our steering committee, we have to beg people to come on. But this year it's really different. We've seen a huge revival. I was at the California State Party meeting, and it was like double the size of any prior meeting. And they've tripled the number of their active local parties now, their active chapters. So a lot of people are pouring in right now. It's very exciting. So we got a lot of people who want to run for office, which is great. Because if you don't have contested election, it's a problem. So for our own structures, we need to have contested election. We need to diversify, the party. We need to be bringing in young people and communities of color. We need to look like the people we represent, the America that's really struggling, the 99%. So I'm very encouraged that there's a new spirit of engagement and a new spirit of welcoming new people into the party. And it's been hard for us when we've been underfunded and understaffed, and when we've been the target of fear campaigns and smear campaigns, and the press won't cover us. But we have all kinds of new skills and new energy right now that can help the national party do a better job of supporting the state parties, so the state parties can do a better job of reaching out, supporting locals, and supporting candidates. It blew my mind to be in Belgium and the Netherlands, where they have elected members of parliament, and they have dozens of employees. They are doing research. The national parties are doing research all the time and providing model bills, model pieces of legislation. They're just putting the stuff in people's hands all the time. The stuff that we take on independently in our own campaigns, the party does for you. But it's very different there. You know, it's proportional representation, which we need eventually. That should be the next step. And they get paid. They get money from the government once they get to be like 1% of the vote. And then when they have electeds, in addition, they get more of a budget. So it really shows, you know, how we are really fighting with two hands tied behind our backs still. But we are fighting, and you know, and they're following what we're doing. But it's really cool to see what they're doing once you start becoming a legitimate party, and you can begin supporting the growth the way it should be. So that's where we're going. Thank you. So, yes.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Stein. I'm David Stevenson with Progressive Soup, and that's Progressive Soup, not Progresso Soup. YouTube, Facebook, and a quick shout out to Mike DeRosa, who's been on Progressive Soup 7 or 8 times over the last 9 years. Other great candidates, Cora Santaguida, Ralph Maher, a number of great candidates that have been on my show over the years. The question is, Connecticut has 2 very rotten parties, Democratic Party and the Republican Party. It has 2 very good parties. It has the Green Party, and it has the Working Families Party. When is there going to be a cooperative effort between the Green Party and the Working Families Party, and to more than double our power?
So I would love to see the day when that can happen. It has certainly been attempted. And a lot depends on the local culture. Let me just say that. Because in New York State, Howie Hawkins was about to win a couple of races. And the Working Families Party mobilized against him. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the Working Family Party has been an apologist for Cuomo. And even when Cuomo completely disregards their agenda once he gets elected. So, unfortunately, the Working Family Party has been abused by the Democratic Party and used as a way to rope people back in and keep them from truly challenging. At the same time, I know there are also really good people in the Working Families Party who want to do the same thing. So I would throw out this challenge. Let's see the Working Families Party work for and support and get a Green elected. And then we'll know that we're in a new place. Number 3. Yes.
I feel good. It is so good to hear you, and I'm so glad to be in Connecticut. My concern, and I'd like to hear you respond from your national experience, is that the press blackout on the issue of war is across the board. CNN, MSNBC, it doesn't matter. Of course, we know Fox is going to do that. But this press, I think CNN and MSNBC have responded to the mass movements. When they are getting more of a critique, they feel free to criticize Trump, etc. But no one will touch the war issue. And particularly this issue of Trump saying $54 billion more on this obscene military budget. Not a comment, not one. And I've also noticed in these big mass rallies that are going on, the war is not even there, not an issue. This science march could have pointed out how the majority of scientific research is going to the military. Not a word. In fact, there was one speaker who mentioned, thank God science gives us the weapons that keep us safe. That was the only reference, and I listened to the whole speech, all the speeches. So I'm thinking, I was so glad to hear you say about May Day. If there's a way that the Greens, who are the only party who is anti-war, the only one has the guts to take this issue on, can bring that into all the other movements. If there's a mass march, I think the Greens should be there with banners against the war. We've got to start building a new anti-war movement. And I've been thinking this on my own, and then the Nation magazine came with a big feature article on how are we going to rebuild an anti-war movement. So I'm just wondering what your feedback is, and also the fight for democratic elections. What about the equal time provision? There are all these liberals out there that should be able to be enlisted in something like that.
So let me just say quickly about the equal time provision, is that it has been basically waylaid. So it cannot be enforced. And there have been other, cannot be enforced. There are other regulations and so on. Right, so, it's not there as a concept that we can rely on. I mean, my feeling, this is just sort of shooting from the hip, but I've been a part of successful movements that have actually passed democratic reforms. Like in my home state, we passed campaign finance reform. We passed public funding for political campaigns that would enable people to run for office without having to grovel, for dollars from corporate money. We passed it. And then the Democratic Party, we passed it by voter referendum by a huge margin. And then the Democratic Party repealed it on a voice vote in the legislature. And, it just brought home to me that you can't you can't separate out a democracy reform from a coalition that's going to keep watchdogging it. And people, in my experience, when they're so strapped economically, they can't separate out basic economic survival from the democracy issues. And they can't prioritize one over the other. This is why we need a political party, This is why, in my view, we're not going to have an anti-war movement while our demonstrations are being run by Democratic Party front groups. Which is why we need a new model for resistance out in the street. We're also not going to make a dent in the war agenda or the climate crisis. We're not going to make a dent while we're just silencing political opponents, which is unfortunately what goes on. Even at the big climate rallies, we are not allowed to be heard. We have to be there and be silent. And, I'm just at the point where I can't go to those rallies anymore. The women's rally, which was a great rally, they mentioned violence against women in every way, except for war, which is probably the most violent thing that happens